And you can't underestimate the value of that because he takes resources to reach such a large place.
Boy, Fred.
Well, I think they're both right. I mean, he raised a lot of money, but I think he used it very effectively. You know, if you saw you could tell as an outside observer the process going along, and then as the election day loomed closer and closer, you saw more things coming in your mailbox, more helpful things. But you're right. You know, I saw him out here a lot, and my experience with him was, you know, when I sat down with county executive candidates and try to express what I thought was Bowie's interest. With a number of them, the response was, well, after the election, we'll sit down and we'll talk about these things. The thing that was very impressive to me about Mr. Baker, when we sat down, he brought up the issues. I mean, he was quite aware of our concerns about park and planning. He was quite aware and mentioned, you know, the more local influence in land use decisions, and committed to saying that was the direction he too would like to go. He mentioned the history of the park and planning, you know. So I mean, obviously he had done his homework. He was prepared, and I think he just ran a good campaign. And obviously had good people advising him, and he carried it well. When you saw him in public settings, he was comfortable. He was confident. He was well prepared, and I think the more people saw that, the more comfortable they became. You know, at the end of the day, the voters are looking for somebody that's competent and knows what the issues are, but they're also looking for somebody that they feel like they're comfortable with or they can trust. And I think he exceeded everybody else in that regard.
Prior to the election, Sheriff Michael Jackson was counting, and this is an assumption on my part, was counting on the African American vote that is in the south part of the county, Suitland, Clinton, and areas like that, where the majority of that vote always went twice for Johnson. And it's the vote down there that Senator Exum really controlled for years. And I truly believe that Jackson's vote, or Johnson's vote that Jackson thought would support him, did not show up. Now that could easily be because Baker was formidable, and he was not just formidable here in North. He did some great campaign election things in the South. And also the fact that the numbers hadn't changed. The numbers were the same numbers that elected Johnson twice were still there, but didn't turn out for Jackson. And of course, when you see that Joanne Benson, who is formidable certainly in some areas down there that the African American community live in by the large majority, she won handily and beat Exum, who had been around for 20 or more years. So does that tell you that that vote has been dispersed, or it's gone in different directions, or that vote voted for, with Jackson and Dean's vote together, they came up with about 46%. And so does that say that vote has changed, or it's was no longer the way it was lockstep under Exum and lockstep under Johnson?
I think you're finding a generational shift taking place in Prince George's County. For generations, people said the most important thing in the election is the red, white, and blue sample ballot that you get from your state senator. Open that up, go all the way down the line, and that's how people get elected.
Vote, sure.
Didn't happen this time. And of course, part of the reason why is because there were so many imposters out there that got confused and the whole thing got neutralized. But also because people made their own decisions and people ran their own independent campaigns. And you know, Melvin High wasn't on any of those ballots. He won. Marilyn Bland wasn't on any of those ballots. She won. So you know, people, the younger, newer voters, just exercise their own judgment. And I guess in a democracy, that's a good thing.
Oh, sure, it's an excellent. If that's the case, I think that's great. That really means that there's been a shift in the voting base. You know, the shift has been to younger people are now energized, and they're now playing the political list, which is so important. So that probably explains that. The other question in that race that I have, Sam Dean from the council, and Sam Dean, who had a piece of Bowie and, in my opinion, never really did anything that I could look at and say, Joe, we have to thank Sam Dean for being this active on behalf of the city where we live. I don't think Sam Dean did anything. He runs again in what looked to me like an impossible race for him. From the beginning, I had said Sam Dean doesn't do anything. However, with 13% of the vote, and we talked about this before, and I know you have an opinion, Lynn, on this thing. That 13% that Sam Dean had, did that come from Jackson's base, or did that come from Baker's base? Or did it split? And like you suggested, it might be the base is changing. It might be a different base. What do you think?
My initial reaction was that Sam Dean probably took more votes from Jackson than from Baker. I don't know that, but I would have thought that area, which is my councilman district, would have been stronger for Jackson because of his alliance with Senator Exum and
Sure.
and Camille Exum and so forth. So I think my gut just tells me that the Sam Dean candidacy hurt Jackson more than anybody else.
Yeah, I think
Fred?
I mean, two things about Sam Dean. One is he had the best campaign song of any of the 5 candidates.
What was it?
It's called "The Servant of the People." Very, very catchy. And the second thing, it was on his website. And then the second thing, you got to listen to it. I think hopefully it's still up. You can listen to it. And then the second thing about Sam Dean is his support base was his council district, as you were saying. And that was also Jack Johnson's biggest base. And so in that regard, you could say that it did hurt Mike Jackson.
Sam Dean didn't have, and realistically, if you look at it, Sam Dean from the get-go didn't have a chance. So he was really, in fact, a spoiler. And then you wonder, you suggested he had a great campaign song, but he also had some very slick campaign material coming into your home. And in the test of I saw three very smart campaign literature things, slick copies come in, and I know the cost of the 3 of them was near 20 grand, at least, maybe less, maybe a little more. But I thought, who is funding? Where does Sam Dean get the money? And how does he get the money to actually? He looked from the standpoint of how he was campaigning, that he was more formidable than he really is. Who supports him to the tune of the dollars that supported his campaign?
I don't know. I didn't go back to look at the campaign reports.
I didn't either.
Obviously, he raised some money. In one regard, it surprised me because I had kind of assumed that Geron was going to run 3rd and Dean would run 4th or 5th. But at the end, he ran 3rd and Geron ran 4th. So that surprised me a little bit. But maybe you're right. Maybe you and Len are both right. There's a significant shift in the voting population and the voting interest. But again, you have to look at there was a relatively low number of people voting. So a big chunk of voters in one location could really move a decision. And I think you're right. I think he ended up taking more votes away from Mike Jackson than he did from Rushern Baker. So, maybe when you sit back and do the analysis of all of these, you'll get more answers. But I think anecdotally, I think you got your finger on it.
The other thing that we haven't discussed is the anti-incumbent sentiment around this country. Prince George's lost 2 incumbent state senators by very well qualified challengers. And I don't know if that's attributable to that. I think that also plays into the Baker election. Sam Dean may have been perceived as an incumbent because he had been a councilman.
Well, there was some
Baker
criticism
was not
about
an
Jackson that the Washington Post criticized him as being a 3rd-term Mr. Johnson, and I'm not sure that helped him a lot in the process.
It's true what you just said. That I was working the poll in my precinct, which is Kenilworth, and a guy came by, and I was pushing Geraldine Valentino Smith, and he said to me, "Is she an incumbent?" And I said, "No, she's not an incumbent. This is her first time at the delegate." He's good, and he took her card, and then he turned around and said to me, "I'm not voting for any incumbents. So anyone else you're pushing, don't tell me about it." And I then said, "Well, let me say this to you. In the 5th Congressional District, if they hold Steny Hoyer below 70% in this election, this primary," I said, "it'll be a victory for the other side." And of course, Steny came in with 85%, and Steny will do better than that in the next runaround. But it actually came in, I'm voting against all
I think you're right. I think
incumbents.
there was some of that. I saw some of that as from people who
Surprised me.
wanted to talk about that, and part of it's clearly all understandable. Some of it's pretty general, and sometimes it reflects more anger than thought. But sometimes,
I agree.
people were clearly paying attention, and I think that's what happened to a couple of those senators. People just held them to account. Held them accountable for more than some of them have been held in a long time.
Sure.
Well, Mr. Mayor, by seeing your shirt, I'm reminded of the candidacy of Geraldine Valentino Smith, who I think will be a great delegate as long as she gets over her shyness problem.
Yeah, that is the one problem she won't have. I think she's going to do well up there, but you're right. She'll adapt.
Her challenges are coming to her very soon.
Of course, her big problem is having been trained as a lawyer. That's the challenge. If she can overcome that,
well, you think
as
a nurse she would help.
Well,
certainly we don't need another lawyer. But I wonder, she had the question mark on Geraldine representing Bowie. I hope she does very well.
She'll do well.
But her problem is, as a rookie, you go down to Annapolis. It's what committee you get on. If the committee has something to do with finances, Ways and Means, or whatever,
appropriations,
if she can gets on one of those committees, she can have an impact. If she doesn't, she'll be out in the woods all alone, yelling hallelujah.
Well, the conflict, and you guys know more about this than anybody. The challenge she's going to have is, as a new member, she brings all that enthusiasm, all that excitement to a process that is there to slow that down and to try to kind of inhibit that kind of a participation. So that's going to be her conflict.
Okay, well, go ahead. We're wrapping it up. But
she has the advantage of having some friends down in Annapolis, and some people that she knew from her prior attorney lobbying days.
Right.
Oh,
so she has some connections.
A little step up.
Absolutely.
But it'll be very interesting to see what committee she has a chance to serve on. But anyway, that generally we've got to wrap it up. It goes very quickly, and we didn't get into a number of the things, like you mentioned the new State's Attorney Alsterbrook.
Yeah,
I'm very interested to see how she does.
I think people are going to be impressed with her.
Glenn Ivey, I think, did not do a great job during his tenure, so I'm looking forward to her. I then wonder about Marilyn Bland, how she keeps getting elected and she's not living in Disney World. But that's it, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll be here again soon. So thank you for watching Talk of the Town, and we look forward to being with you again in the very near future. Good night.